Is Meghan Markle trying to rewrite history? What is behind the big security scare around Catherine? And what's up with WhatsApp Willie? We'll answer all those and lots more in a packed episode. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and this week my panel includes the Mail on Sunday's royal correspondent Natasha Livingston and the Daily Mail's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. Now, before we get into it, this is my weekly reminder to subscribe to our channel if you don't already. All you need to do is press that subscribe button on the Daily Mail Royals page and you'll never miss another episode. We're getting so close now to that 300,000 subscribers mark, and we need your help to get us there. Go on. One way to do that is to keep sharing this show with friends, family, and anyone you think who might enjoy it. Tell everyone, tell all your friends. We're journalists, we don't have friends to tell, so you need to get somebody else. Natasha, let's get into it. Last week, Rebecca told us of a security scare involving the King and the Queen, and now we have one involving Catherine, the Princess of Wales.
Yeah, it's the sort of news where you just think, if this was about you, it would be just totally devastating. So it was the news following the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in the US, something that doesn't normally interfere with the royal world. The attempted assassin, Thomas Crooks, he had pictures of the Princess of Wales on his phone. And, you know, we don't know why he had those photos, but it's pretty terrifying to think that somebody who, you know, was clearly capable of attempting to kill or shoot Donald Trump would be interested in the Princess of Wales in that way. So yeah, it's raised a lot of concerns, and it was the FBI that found the photos, so yeah. It's
incredible, isn't it, Richard, when you think that there's a lot of discussion at various times about the expense of security for royals and who's getting the security and all of those things, but it's a stark reminder of why security is such a discussion and so important.
It really is. I mean, we've heard so much about Prince Harry and Meghan's security, haven't we? Of course, he took legal action against the British government over withdrawing security when he was visiting, and that remains a big issue. But this is a stark reminder that other members of the royal family are probably at more risk than they are. I mean, look, we don't know. It may be just that he quite fancied Princess of Wales. You know, we don't know why he was searching for her. But it does draw attention to something which security services have always said, which is the sort of lone individual, often mentally ill, is more of a risk to the royal family than sort of terrorist organisations. That they feel there's always someone wanting to make their name or that sort of thing. And those are the type of people who the security services are usually very much on the lookout for.
It's the biggest needle in a haystack of all time, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you think about people even in the past that have broken into Buckingham Palace, it was normally people that, you know, didn't really have any profile, and as you say, were just kind of lone rangers that could pose a massive threat. So I guess that's why it's so concerning.
Well, in happier news, Natasha, for Catherine, she released a new photo this week, one by her of lovely Prince George for his birthday. What did you think of it?
Yeah, it was adorable. It was black and white, which seems to be very on trend for them, very chic, very vogue. And yeah, he was in a suit. He looked very dapper. He looked really, really old. I think he's really grown up. Yeah, it was just really sweet. And he was wearing a little friendship bracelet, which Kensington Palace wouldn't get into, but I don't think you have to be a genius to think it's probably related to his trip to see Taylor Swift, and that he's definitely a Swiftie. So yeah, just a really nice photo.
Oh, he must be a Swiftie now, even if he wasn't beforehand. After
exactly. And if he's anything like his dad, then he's probably got some good dance moves.
He certainly seemed to enjoy that concert.
Yeah, shaking it off.
And so, Richard, the picture also does seem to suggest that they're changing the way they do certain things, doesn't it?
Yes, we should explain that previously the palace would give photographs to mark a big occasion such as a birthday to media organisations and newspapers the night before with an embargo. They'd have the photographs and the details, and then they would release it at a certain time, usually sort of 11 p.m. the night before. But since that row over the photograph that Catherine took and had been digitally altered,
the Mother's Day photo.
Yeah, since then, the palace has just put the photograph on social media the next day, and it's very significant because what it means is that there's no problem for agencies, because previously agencies who had a policy of not distributing photographs that may have been digitally altered, they would have to then raise concerns. But now if it's on social media, it's up to media companies if they publish those photographs or not. So yeah. I think the Palace is keen to stress that it's not a new policy, but it certainly seems to be that way, judging from what we've seen. And you could argue it makes sense
Smart.
in that respect.
Stops a lot of fuss, right?
Exactly, and that's up to us if we want to publish these pictures. I just don't think then it avoids, in my opinion, a bit of a silly row, really.
And Natasha, there's possibly a technical advantage to doing things this way as well, isn't there?
Yeah, so if you're sent the photo, say, as a PDF, it's possible to then access the metadata of the photo. And then what happened with the Mother's Day photo is people went in the nitty-gritty of that, and they knew when it had been saved, when it had been edited, and all of that information is things that the palace does not want people knowing. As you say, it invites a level of scrutiny which can create headlines and a row. And by just uploading it on social media, it means you just take the photo and there's no additional information that they might not want people to know.
No more questions.
Exactly.
Now, this week we got to dive into the royal accounts, didn't we? Now, obviously, that's probably not everybody's idea of a fun day out. I don't know how thick these documents are,
Thick,
but
very thick.
Yeah, but they do, for the patient journalists amongst you, reveal quite a few interesting things, don't they?
Yeah, so there were two briefings on Tuesday. There was one for the main Crown Estate and then one for the Duchy of Cornwall, which relates to the Prince of Wales. But the first one, the Crown Estate, was all about what the royal household have kind of been up to for the past year. And it does allow a level of transparency, which we don't normally get, about expenditure. For example, they say, we know that, for example, they obviously did the state trip to Kenya, but then we get a breakdown of how much did that cost, how much did the flight cost, even the date of when staff went out for the recce beforehand, which is all information we don't normally have. So yeah, for journalists to sink your teeth into, it's a really great time, but yeah, it's a bit of a headache. But this year there was quite an environmental theme because they revealed that the Bentleys and the helicopters are going to be run on biofuel, and even in the future, all of the royal cars could be electric vehicles. So that was a real kind of theme of the briefing this year.
And also Frogmore Cottage got a lot of attention in the papers, didn't it? What's the latest?
So at the briefing last year, royal correspondents were told that there would be an update as to who was living in Frogmore Cottage after Harry and Meghan left. There was no such information, so all the royal correspondents were asking, what's happened, where is the information? And they've said it's currently empty, and they would not speculate as to who is going to be moving in. Obviously, people have speculated that could be Prince Andrew if he is evicted from Royal Lodge, but the palace officials were absolutely not going to get into that.
Do you think, Richard, that this is something that the King very much did want to have sorted out by now?
Well, certainly that's the impression we've got with all the briefing about the King wanting Prince Andrew and Fergie to leave Royal Lodge. And it is a bit embarrassing to have Frogmore Cottage sitting there empty. But remember that, it's not a particularly grand property, Frogmore Cottage. It used to be divided into separate houses for members of staff, for servants.
I'll have it. It's not a dump, is it?
It's got house renovation.
It's certainly not a dump now, because an awful lot of money was spent by Harry and Meghan doing it up. So now it's all lovely. Why not, give it back to some staff, maybe reward their loyal staff with lovely accommodation previously used by Harry and Meghan?
That would be a nice touch. And Natasha, we also learned some intriguing things about Prince William's phone habits.
Yes, so this came from Alistair Martin, who previously has been running the Duchy. He's actually now about to move on and work for the King. And some cynics suggested maybe it was to do with this way of working, because he basically said previously when he used to work with the King, when he was Prince of Wales, if he wanted to talk to him, he'd pick up the phone. They would have an old-fashioned conversation. Whereas now, if he wants to talk to Prince William, it's all over WhatsApp. And he says over the weekends there's been times where his WhatsApp messages from Prince William have been in the double digits. So yeah, modern King. Or modern prince, I should say.
WhatsApp Willie. And we also learned a little bit, didn't we, about Prince William's finances, and particularly how much has earned from the Duchy.
Yeah, the profits were 23 million, which is certainly not something to sniff at. And it's definitely a sign that the Duchy exists to provide an income to the future king, and it's definitely serving that function. But there was a little bit less transparency at the briefing as to tax and the sort of nitty-gritty that in previous years journalists have been given. So I guess we'll have to see next year if they're going to be a bit more transparent about what's behind that figure.
A nice chunk of that earning is me buying those iced lemon biscuits. They're the best. I can't get rid of them. I can't get enough. Richard, I wanted to ask you now about the fascinating revelation that's come about that the late Prince Phillip was officially caught up in a major British political scandal.
Yeah, this is something that's certainly taken a while to emerge. It relates to the 1960s, and I think the Mail on Sunday has been, like a dog with a bone. It's been sort of beavering away and has finally got some information from the FBI. So it relates to the Profumo scandal, and the information that they've given was that the FBI told a US ambassador in London that Prince Philip personally knew the women involved in this scandal, Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice-Davies, who were showgirls. The reason that, to be fair, that was known already, that Prince Philip knew them, and he did so because he was a friend acquaintance of Stephen Ward, who's the osteopath at the centre of the scandal.
And this was all detailed in The Crown, if you remember.
Yes, there was a whole episode about it, and Stephen Ward was an amateur artist, and he actually sketched Prince Philip in a sketch which sort of disappeared from public view at the time of the scandal, I think.
Weird that. How did that happen?
Yes, I mean, essentially, it was just a bit of gossip. So all it was the FBI was passing on to the ambassador this bit of gossip that Prince Philip knew them. So that's all it was, gossip. It doesn't mean that there was anything untoward, but he may have met these women via his friendship with Stephen Ward at the time.
Is there any suggestion that he was involved with either of the women?
Well, I think the phrase was personally involved, but that was gossip, that was just what someone had overheard.
Yeah.
But Prince Philip did have quite a sort of racy set. They used to meet in Soho, and he knew lots of interesting people. And Stephen Ward was a fascinating character. He was convicted of living off immoral earnings in a case which just wouldn't happen now, and sadly he killed himself before he died, before he ever saw any jail time. But it was a very important scandal which helped bring down Harold Macmillan's government in the 60s.
Well, it's so long ago, and it's still seen as a real landmark in British history, isn't it?
There have been several films about it, a very good one called Scandal. So
there you go, check it out.
There'll probably be another one now.
Probably, called Prince Philip or something. Let's hear some of your comments now. And more than 4,000 of you commented on last week's show. Thank you so much. We do love reading your comments. Here are a selection that caught our eye. First up, Vicky Carino saw the funny side in the story about the King and Queen's security scare from last week. She wrote, "That was hilarious." Was it? The Queen always seems so kind-hearted about off-script happenings. At least the police were more alert than our Secret Service. Well, actually, Vicky is talking about the assassination attempt on President Trump there, so an American viewer. Australian viewer Fliss wasn't concerned that Prince William couldn't fly to her homeland for the women's football final. She writes, "We don't need William to actually turn up. We love the royal family and totally understand the tyranny of distance. The age of internet media is good enough for us all. Love your show." I would have attempted an Australian accent for Fliss, but I can't even do it anymore. And finally, Denise Campbell-Baldwin suggests that the public are demonstrating which royals they like. "I think Harry is the one fighting a lost cause. The royal family are loved even more, as seen by the applause for our Catherine at Wimbledon." Oh, remember that. Well, let's bring the panel back now. Now, Richard, you have caused a bit of a big stir online with a story you wrote about an interview with a certain Meghan Markle.
Yes, I mean, this relates back to the first time we sort of got to know Meghan was the engagement interview in 2017, and it was conducted by Mishal Husain, who's a very serious news presenter in Britain. It was very interesting. It gave an insight into their relationship.
And I think we were all very happy, weren't we? We loved them for it.
Yeah, I think those interviews are always sort of exciting because you can tell the couple are really thrilled to have got engaged, and it's meant to be a very happy interview. But in their Netflix series, Harry and Meghan, Meghan gave a very new perspective on it, a very negative one. She said that she felt it was an orchestrated, it was a reality show, and the whole thing had sort of been staged. Well, what's happened this week is that Mishal Husain, she's a very calm kind of character and doesn't usually...
Well, she's one of our prestige journalists, isn't she?
Yeah. She's certainly not someone who's kind of looking for headlines, but she's written an article for a magazine in which she says she was clearly astonished by Meghan's comments because, it wasn't staged at all. And it was, she felt that, if anything, Harry and Meghan very much had lines prepared. They knew what they wanted to say, and she thought that came across. So it's
and that's only smart, right? That's like, you go to an interview planning what you're going to say.
Exactly. I mean, I've written a piece for Mail Plus that our viewers can read, and that's, I went back and spoke to people about this interview who were there at the time, and also, watched it again myself, and I'm afraid to say some of their answers do look a bit disingenuous now.
Do you think so? Because I was going to ask you, I mean, Meghan's slant on it has made it as sort of like a controversial interview. Well, and now this has just got more complicated.
Well, it very much has, because they've literally changed things that they've said. So just to take one example, they talked about how they met on a blind date. That is what they said in this interview with Mishal Husain. Well, in the Netflix documentary, they said no, it was actually it was via Instagram that Harry had got to know Meghan. He'd taken a shine to her on Instagram and had started following her, and they started communicating with each other. So it wasn't a blind date at all. So that's just one example, but there's lots of similar examples, and also the body language in that interview. Meghan...
Say more. What?
Well, I just think it's such an interesting contrast to previous royal interviews. I mean, at the time, we put it down to the fact that here was Meghan, an actress, someone who was of an age, who was experienced.
And there's something about that glossier American confidence, isn't there?
Yeah, she was so much more confident. Yeah. I mean, you look back at William and Catherine's interview, and obviously Catherine was very shy, and then, my goodness, you look back to Lady Diana, and she was only 19, it was excruciating. But Meghan was very confident. The body language was, she was kind of leaning across Harry, and she very much seemed that she was going to shake up the way that things had been done.
Do you think that they're trying to change history in some way here?
I think they really are. I think Meghan really is trying to rewrite history. There's one version that was out there at the time, and she's trying to say, no, that's not what happened at all. But now this is Mishal Husain saying, well, wait a minute, don't just try to rewrite history like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Natasha, what is it with royal interviews? They always come back to bite them.
Well,
always.
I would say they're not always. When young William and Catherine had their engagement interview, I don't remember any particular fallout from that. I think they really seemed like a young couple, really in love, maybe a bit nervous, but I think most people remember that as very genuine. And it's just, when you go back and watch it, it's really quite adorable to also see how they've grown as individuals. That being said, royal interviews are obviously very rare, and with that comes very high stakes. And if means
sorry, they used to be rare until Harry came along.
Wow. Typically rare, yes, exactly. Hence the controversy, because normally royals do not sit down and do interviews, and then that creates lots of interest if they are going to say something, demand to say something big. I mean, if we look back at when the King gave his interview with Jonathan Dimbleby, he admitted to adultery. That obviously caused big shockwaves. Obviously, Princess Diana's interview with Martin Bashir, that has been involved in all sorts of controversy, mainly because of the way that he secured the interview through the fraudulent documents. And then we don't really need to talk about Prince Andrew's Panorama interview. We all know what a disaster that was. So they're very rare, and I think royals should embark on them with great caution.
I mean, it's easy to forget how rare they are. I mean, remember that Queen Elizabeth, during her record-breaking reign, never gave an interview. No. Catherine, other than this awkward interview with Tom Bradby, has never given an interview. I mean, we've got Prince Harry this evening, actually. He's going to be on ITV in Britain giving another interview. And the thing is, he's done so many, like just to promote his memoirs Spare, he gave a string of interviews. So you kind of look back at it and you forget that this interview with Meghan, it was a big deal because it was the first time. And we didn't know at the time that they would go on to become, chat show favourites.
Well, the royals are supposed to be something different from celebrity, aren't they? It's supposed to be a whole other echelon.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. You've got to sort of retain the mystique. You can't just become, sofa surfing like, Harry's become.
Retain the mystique. Well, unfortunately, that might be a bit more difficult. There's another sort of slightly naughty story that came from the Mail this week, wasn't there, that linked US Vice President and hopeful President Kamala Harris with Meghan.
Yes, this was just an item in the Ephraim Hardcastle column. It was just speculating that because Meghan has spoken very excitedly about Kamala Harris in the past. That was when she was chosen as a running mate by Joe Biden. What Meghan said at the time was she was really excited by it because, not because of politics necessarily, but because of representation, that she was very pleased to see a woman on the ticket and also a mixed race woman, like Meghan, mixed race. So that was what excited her. So, there's speculation that obviously they're very keen for Kamala Harris to win the election if she is selected. And what Ephraim Hardcastle was speculating that maybe Kamala will give a role to Meghan. She has spoken favourably of Meghan in the past. She's congratulated her on some work she did for the Black Lives Matter movement, and Ephraim suggested maybe Meghan could be appointed as the ambassador to the Court of St James's.
Wow! So
that would. I have to say,
that's a mischievous little poke, isn't it?
I think that's extremely unlikely, and it could do terminal damage to Anglo-American relations.
I imagine there's a few
see.
heads spinning, Natasha, at Buckingham Palace with even the very thought of Meghan in American politics. What do you think?
Yeah, I think particularly if she was to keep her title, Duchess of Sussex, that would just be a real headache for the royal family, who are obviously notoriously non-political, and then to have a royal title associated with any political office would just be a nightmare for them, frankly.
Well, I don't think her allegiances aren't exactly being hidden under a bushel. Did she not skip the state dinner with Donald Trump?
Yes, and also obviously Meghan, before she knew Prince Harry, was extremely rude about Donald Trump, calling him a misogynist and this type of thing. So yeah, it's fair to say we know where her allegiances lie.
Yeah, well, let's move on to Sarah Ferguson now. We don't talk about her much on this show, but one lucky rich man spent $100,000 for just a night out with her. This isn't some sort of indecent proposal reboot, is it? Please tell me.
How dare you?
I'm sorry, but I was just reading this question like, what is happening?
No, this is Sarah, Duchess of York. She is a great charity fundraiser, and she was at an event, a charity auction in the south of France. And to encourage them to bid, she said, look, you can bid to come on a day with me. You can go on a charity event, or, you can even come for dinner at Royal Lodge, where she lives with...
200,000 and you don't have to come to dinner with me.
with Prince Andrew. But anyway, it did raise €100,000 for charity, so good luck to her. I mean, we'll see what it involves. And,
what was the charity, do we know?
It's the Knights of Charity. Don't know where the money goes exactly, but it seems to be, it's a reputable organisation.
I'm sure it's a wonderful cause.
So, it just shows that Fergie does still have pulling power.
I think that's great of her to, spend that much time to raise some money.
Yeah, and she does feel strongly about causes, as we know.
She does. I've worked with her on charity events. She's very gung ho with.
And come on, just last week we were talking about how much I would pay to. If the public could enter Royal Lodge and inspect...
How much would you pay?
I'm not sure, €100,000.
We're going to learn how much Richard earns.
Maybe a tenner or something to view...
Oh, Prince, so you work here,
we could view Prince Andrew's collection of teddies. So that's clearly what was the motivation in this case.
That could well be scarring. Now, we don't have a Fergie section of the show. Maybe we should. But we do have a Princess Anne section of the show. Cue the fanfare. Despite the recent setbacks, Richard, she's gone to Paris.
Yeah, I mean, you could say this is amazing, really. Just a few weeks after being left concussed, doesn't even know what caused her severe head injuries, but she's undertaken her first foreign engagement since then, which is to the Olympics, because she's a member of the Olympic Committee, and she's gone to Paris. And, she competed in the Olympics herself in the past, so she was obviously very keen to go, but it just shows, how devoted she is to her work. And
I can imagine a certain stubbornness. Who would not look forward to the Olympics every 4 years if that's your thing? Why would you be blow it if I'm going to miss that?
Exactly, and I should here just add a shout out, you could say, for the Duke of Kent. The Duke is 89 later this year, but he's still carrying out engagements. And just this week he went to a string of events in Kent, including opening a new lifeboat station. And you just think, my goodness, at his age, it's really quite impressive.
Could you keep up with Princess Anne, Natasha?
Oh God, absolutely not. I would need to be in the gym, mental and physical training.
But it's astonishing really how important these older royals still are. I mean, I know that sounds, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but we're relying on them, and they're physically, you know, a different.
They're dedicated, they're absolutely dedicated to duty, which is something that obviously has been suggested. Perhaps some of the younger generations are not quite so dedicated.
Natasha,
not by me, but by some
saying?
people. Well, for example, Prince Harry, that's obviously one of the criticisms that he gets, is that, you know, duty and turning up to these traditional ribbon cutting events, people think that's really important. And also one of things that was mentioned at the Duchy briefing with Prince William is he's all about impact and doing fewer engagements, but ones that he says has a bigger impact. But that's a different way of looking at royal work, and you know, there are people like Princess Anne who she's all about the numbers. She goes and she meets people and she shakes hands, and people really appreciate it. And
we love her for it, and we know you do as well. Well, sticking on the theme of the Olympics, we've got some absolutely brilliant images for you now of the royals at the Olympics. Great stuff. I hope you enjoyed that. My thanks to Natasha, Richard, and to you for watching. We will see you again next week. Bye for now.